welcome. We're gonna get started with the next session, which is myth busting, what's real and what's fluff in manufacturing tech with Natan back on stage and Rick Bullotta. So come on up, guys.
Thank you.
Do we have assigned seats?
Yeah, well, just don't go very far. So, hi, welcome back. So we're gonna talk about myth busting. For those of you who don't know Rick, do you wanna introduce yourself real quick?
Professional instigator. My background, quick version, grew up in manufacturing in the steel industry, worked for a number of software companies over the years, started a couple companies in the space, and now I advise, mentor people in the manufacturing space.
So, you know, when we designed the session, there were supposed to be like tomatoes for the crowd, but Rick promised he will kind of behave. I mean, I don't guarantee that, so I apologize for no tomatoes, but we're gonna go pretty quick here and see if we can get to the crowd. But yeah, let's go. So myth busting. The first one, better technology alone can bring more people into the manufacturing industry. Is that true or false? Myth or not?
A little of both. In fact, I actually just saw an article yesterday. It was a group trying to get people into manufacturing in the Midwest, talking about other soft kind of things like flexible work schedules, things like just respect, better pay. They help a lot. That's our technology itself can actually help those as well, if you think about it, right?
Yeah.
If we can do just-in-time training with technology for people, making them, better informed, more interchangeable, that can allow us to have that more flexible work environment when people can do more than one thing.
But it's not only tech.
Clearly not. So we'll go partial.
Partial. Okay, next. Kind of related. Well, hold on.
What does that?
What just happened?
We're gonna have to decode these visuals.
Okay, the next one, kind of related. Knowledge workers only exist in the office.
Like we covered that in our podcast the other week. It's just a truly triggering thing for me.
Totally.
Anybody that's spent time on a plant floor knows the incredible amount of knowledge that's locked up in folks that have been doing the job there. We do need to do a better job of capturing's not the right word, but disseminating that, training new folks that are coming in. We've got a whole wave. Everybody knows, we're gonna.
To me, this is just kind of like one of the most arrogant definitions that we're still carrying around. It's kind of the worst cousin of white collar, blue collar of sorts.
Yep.
It's like, let's just say all these people are knowledge workers. Almost automatically, you define all these people are not.
Correct.
And in the day and age we live in, it's just.
By the same token, what's the
and who decides what's knowledge and what's not?
And there's experiential knowledge, right? That's you can't just learn that overnight. That said, I think everybody knows we're going to have a multi-million job gap in the next few years that we're going to have to fill. I wonder why. One thing that I traveled other parts of the world. Earlier in my career and got to see things like apprenticeships as a very effective way. I'm a big fan of what Mike Rowe does with Micro Works and trying to bring respect back to the trades, back to real physical work. And let's hope that
I think we'll maybe hear a bit about that later from Secretary Howe from Massachusetts, who's coming.
Awesome.
Like vocational schooling, all that stuff. We kind of lost it in America. We have to bring it back. Like there's no.
For sure.
This loss of skills is way more critical than how happy are the knowledge workers and their whatever.
Obviously a myth.
Obviously a myth. So
obviously fluff.
That's a fluff. All right. So. Let's move on here. So is GenAI going to solve all this? It's like, do we have the right tech to solve the gap in knowledge work job?
Everything goes through the hype curve, right? Clearly, we're kind of what's the Gartner term? Peak of inflated expectations.
Peak of inflated expectations.
But there's real stuff happening, right?
Yeah.
It's helping, no question. It's not going to replace.
I just see it as like a modality. It's like I feel like the way I explained AI the other day was like. Or the experience of GenAI, it was like, I remember as if it was yesterday, the moment I used Google enough to say, there's no fucking way I'm going to use Yahoo anymore. There was like a moment that happened. And I'm not saying it's complete there,
I get
but
you.
it's like, that's what's happening.
Ninja Google skills, if you recall, like that was like a career advantage, right? If you had that skill, whether to find code, to do, competitive research, whatever. So mastery of generative AI, but it's not just also I think the term co-pilot's actually a pretty good term, right? It's augmenting humans with these capabilities.
Yeah.
I think we're over-focusing a little bit on kind of the generative AI as that kind of voice agent. That's going to be helpful, but I'm seeing some really cool stuff going on now to use GenAI to help people configure these systems, right? Different modalities for doing that, automating a lot of the kind of grunt work, and that's what a co-pilot type approach can do for you.
Yeah, on the ninja skills, I gotta tell you, I had like this canned answer, like, what do you do better than your team? Because there's not a lot, honestly. It was an awesome team. It's like, I can search like nobody's business.
It's a good skill to have.
Yeah, but now I'm getting replaced, which is also good.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, let's keep going. So this is
not true.
Not true. Not true. Okay, next. Can automation fully replace humans in manufacturing? And is this thing with all the
humanoid robotics,
Musk, Elon's robots gonna really happen?
Well, clearly humanoid robotics are trying to attack a broader problem, not just manufacturing. That's some of the most obvious use cases, but at least today, the human hand is an absolutely amazing piece of equipment. It's got sensors, very fine-grained actuators, and I've yet to see any, whether it's a fixed robot or a mobile robot, are there going to be, I've also, good, bad, or other, I've spent a good bit of time the past few months caring for my elderly mom. They're saying, we're going to have, robot. I assure you, a robot is not going to be able to do the things that care workers and loved ones can do.
So Elon is wrong.
Well, I'm going to go, this is, at least for now, snapshot in time. We don't have
because he kind of got EVs right, and maybe kind of got
space
rockets.
He got space rocks pretty good.
Yeah.
I think the one way to look at this too, though, is that it's just where can we apply them for the biggest bang for the buck, not trying to replace everybody, right? The other thing that humans do, as everyone knows, is fuzzy tasks. We can do the things, and in a manufacturing environment, you quickly learn that the exception is the rule. Robots historically have been very good at highly repetitive tasks. Yeah. So it's going to take some new innovations in AI and how we program them before we get there.
So what I noticed is that sometimes people think about robotics through a pure business model. It's like we're gonna need to manufacture a lot, or we need certain automation for supporting this kind of variations on the line, or we need this kind of throughput, and we're building a new factory, so obviously we're going to design automation first. Yep. So I would call that like cost reduction. The other operators people use, and sometimes they overlap, I don't think always, is like we just can't get enough people. But if we could, we wouldn't necessarily automate, which is like this kind of weird tension, and goes back to the point we had before.
There's one other dimension too, and I think safety, drudgery, the highly physical, repetitive tasks, classic automation is going to play.
Like welding and
always
painting.
Has played. The steam engine gave horses a break. Yeah. We'll see what gives plant workers a break.
Still, I think the last number I saw is like China is outpacing US 13x in robotic installations and stuff like that. And interestingly enough, they don't have a human shortage. So maybe there's something to learn.
And to that point, I think the reshoring initiatives that we're seeing in the United States, automation is going to have to play a role to offset the labor cost advantages, no question.
So I think automations, so we're busting this one.
Not today.
Yeah. Well, I guess last point on this is like, when the robots actually take over and we're still missing humans, you know what humans are going to do? New things. So they're not going away because the brain...
I'm going to lead the resistance.
Yeah. So it's like non-artificial AI. We're going to be NAIs
a fire hose and they'll short circuit something. We'll get them.
Yeah. So now, because all these robots, they're becoming smarter. We just saw Daniela's robot. That was actually pretty cool, I thought.
Yeah, for sure.
Can produce a lot of content for Augmented this way. I'll do a sample episode for sure. But unsupervised AI, and maybe you would explain that a little bit. Is it ready for production? What do you think?
Like any new tech, it's like you have to analyze the risk, right? The criticality. A lot of stuff we're doing now is human in the loop. So if you think about AI, right? We use data from the past to build models to predict the future, so we can make decisions in the present that change
until the model breaks.
Right? So, but the point being that there's a sense, decide, act cycle. Increasingly, we're using technology for the first two, and now for the third cycle, the act cycle. But in some of these mission critical applications, or as we're learning and evolving this technology, we're going to need human in the loop in a lot of cases. That said, one of the partners out there, TwinThread, that I work with, they're actually in that closed loop scenario, optimizing quality parameters on a production line by writing down set points. Yep. So it can be done. It just needs to be done prudently and with the right risk assessment. I'm not ready to have an automated radiologist send messages to the Da Vinci surgical robot, without a human in the loop. Yeah,
I kind of agree with that. It's really interesting because I think model making management is in a way commoditizing. Like we saw a whole wave of startups, I call it like the last gen ML startups, kind of evaporate, and they become, because the infrastructure, AWS are starting so good at management, but not good enough. That's why you need lending and twin threads and all that kind of stuff.
I'm a believer that any new technology, the breakthrough happens when the tooling to let when we democratize it, right? When we take it out of the guru factor and more people can build applications leveraging whatever it is, AI, blockchain, whatever the cool new thing is.
So one Tulip shameless plug here, if you're okay with that. If you're okay with that. So we actually built that internal model management now, and we're debuting it here with landing, so you can actually have external models now directly, because not one platform can deal with the whole universe of models that are going to be out there. So it's pretty exciting, because I think that is becoming real, but not fully there yet. So
and we also have a big problem right now that generative AI is sucking a lot of the oxygen out of both investment and kind of learning and application. So it's an all of the above thing, right? You hear me say it all the time, and not or. There's many, many other aspects to AI machine learning that are readily applicable in the industrial setting. We've got to take advantage of those. Totally.
And I guess last point in this partially kind of sort of true, it is moving fast. I mean, I agree that the GenAI is like sucking a lot of air, but it's also speeding up, not just because of the
money.
Well, there is the money. I knew you were going to say the money. I wanted to say the excitement of tons of engineers that are actually building things. And I don't think there will be PhDs in economics of software development who will measure the phenomena of acceleration, but it's like, you can't deny it. I mean, just the world is going to make software faster. A lot of crap software too, but nonetheless faster.
How many people are old enough to remember some product called Visual Basic? Good enough. So I remember when it first came out, and that was one of the first MES systems, right? People were DIYing it, but we used to say, Visual Basic allowed people to write shitty software at record speed.
Yeah, I built the first. My dad is a controls engineer for traffic, among other things. That's the tool I used to help him build like a planner for that control thing in Visual Basic. It was nuts. But so partially true.
Partially true.
Let's move on. This is cool. But I think this will be fun. So augmented reality, which is I have a really warm place in my heart for that one. Is it a helpful tool for frontline operators or not?
See, that word is a little bit loaded. I mean, I would actually say it can be helpful. It's certainly
maybe helpful.
The first time I met Natan and saw what they were doing, it was kind of integral in your original demo, sort of a mixed
it was in the
reality.
museum,
I don't know if everybody remembers that, but projecting onto the workspace what you were planning to do, using like movement analysis through cameras to automatically complete work, and a lot of those are, you can still see in the demo center. But the idea that it's a feature, right? It's a part of what we do. I just laugh every time I see these AR demos for industrial folks, and they have the plant floor operator with 2 hands on an iPad. Like, well, how are you going to actually do anything if you have both hands?
Yeah.
Most I've done some experiments with different kinds of glasses and things like that. They're tools, right? It's just
tools.
another tool.
I kind of feel GenAI completely killed augmented reality. That's like one way of thinking about this, because
the metaverse collapsed.
The metaverse, yeah, it's just
we're we're in a multiverse now. That's what
totally.
we're trying to do.
And the rant I have on this, and this a lot of my very long and boring PhD dissertation is really focused on augmented reality, is that it's really, I say many things there, but it's like really a form factor problem, because when whoever, Apple, Meta, et al., really perfected to the point that we can use it to do something useful with information, like we don't doubt our phones.
For a 9-hour shift.
For whatever, even like for 2 hours if it's mission critical, then that could be a fine tool. But until we figure out tethering and bandwidth and battery and heat, it made for like 5-6 years of cool-ish demos.
It's great demos. I think it ties back to the comment I made a little earlier too, though, that a lot of advanced technologies get held back by the tooling we have to create applications. So if you think about, I want to create a spatial model of my factory, if I happen to have that in CAD or some other design tool, then at least I have a starting point. But often those haven't actually been annotated in a way that would let you, overlay.
But of course, you only need like
on them.
57 iterations with GenAI to solve that problem. And it's
we'll get there.
Done and done.
So I think it's, once again,
so we
tooling
don't believe
to
in that one.
democratize it.
Let's keep going.
Yeah,
so that's like fluff. Okay. All right. Buckle up. Is OE a valuable metric for measuring performance?
The 3 constituent ones are, actually, to be fair, there's probably a handful of folks in here, given the verticals that you serve, that can accurately measure all 3. They are such a rare percentage of folks that are applying it. And how my thing on this, it's, I do believe that the 3 constituent metrics are helpful when accurate and used in an appropriate way, not used punitively, but used to drive continuous improvement. I also, one of the first gigs I ever had, I was an industrial engineer in the steel industry before I went into operations, and we had incentives that we use. Safety was one of the offsetting factors. If you're running the processes as fast as you possibly can, naturally the risk of injury or worse, nowadays energy and sustainability, right? You run the process 10% faster, but it uses 50% more water or energy.
Yeah.
These are things we have to consider.
So it's a noisy metric.
It can be, and it's
insufficient metric.
It's insufficient metric. I was actually talking with Julie Frazier a little bit earlier about a Mesa conference I went to about, it was probably 2010, 2011, but I made a pitch that you could have higher OEE and lower financial performance, and the bees were buzzing. That's not possible.
Like
it actually is, right? Because OEE also considers that the impact of poor quality, poor availability, and poor performance are somewhat equivalent, and that's not the case.
So basically we all need to shift to what?
Focus on the metrics that matter to you, right? That are important for your business, on-time delivery, all the other elements that determine success. And if you can use it, and you can use it accurately and effectively, I guess it's okay. But unfortunately, I think it's the first thing people go to, and that's just a problem. So I'm going to say no.
Okay.
Shocking, I know.
Shocking. Well, let's heat it up then. So, unified namespace, UNS, is that the ideal architecture for digital transformation?
There is none, right? I mean, it's a point in time. It's an extremely powerful capability. If I asked everybody in this room what it meant, I'm sure I would, if there's 100 people here, I'll get 110 different definitions. But the official original definition was a snapshot of the current state of your operations. And that's a very important piece of it. But the historical exhaust, as we know, is very, very important. Even for kind of real-time operations, it's important for applying AI or analytics or anything that we want to do. And there are some real fundamental limitations with the current implementations of unified namespace today that just creates more fragmentation. Ironically, the goal is to bring it together, right? To give us a unified place to go.
So should we think about UNS more as a methodology and an aspirational set of principles over, because, is the ideal architecture? To me, it's like saying, back in the day when we were, people were doing lamp stacks, So
UNSs today are typically very awful for transactional stuff. So we need to do transactional stuff in our world. There's some real problems with putting, let's call it enterprisey data in there. Can you pump it in there? Sure, but you're going to get stale. Anyway, there's lots of implementation considerations. I'm very happy that it's starting a dialogue about something that basically my whole career has been recognizing that we had this dissimilar system, lots of systems. Whirlpool, I think at one time we audited 400 or 500 different systems in their plant, not instances, different vendors.
When was that?
2009-ish, 2010.
Not too long ago.
So the reality then was, how do you bring that together? How do you provide a consolidated view? UNS is kind of the latest iteration of an approach for that, but there's no such thing as ideal. It's a continuum. It's a work in progress.
Yeah. So my version of that, no size fits all, and should really check out what we've done in the tech for that, because
there's a lot, and it's actually super cool. If you haven't seen the demo, it's like you can actually see the data flowing in the UNS demo.
And it actually exemplified this thing that you're saying, that there's or what I'm saying, that there's no size fits all.
Right.
That you see the UNS architecture for the life science stuff that is hybrid, discrete, continuous batch versus discrete, it's like small tweaks.
Well, and everybody here knows the assets live so long in our world, right? So you're always tying together legacy stuff.
Okay, so Rick, verdict.
I'm gonna give that one a partial, but.
Partial, okay.
All right, we'll go.
That's good. We like controversy. So
I could change my mind.
Standards are useful and helpful to advance the industry. That should be a fast one.
Yeah, it should be fast.
Or we talk about 2 hours.
Make it fast. So I was involved in ISA 88, ISA 95, some other stuff. My experience has been that they always start with virtuous goals, but they get so neutered down. Anything designed by committee tends to be lowest common denominator, not what.
The biggest issue is the adoption. And
or non-existence, right?
Once upon a time part of the Java community process, which was the standard body for the Java language, that were kind of amazing at the time because there were a lot of developers.
Yep.
But you know what happens when they try to take that standard and use it to make a operating system for mobile phone? It failed. It took Google and Android to make that happen.
Well, if you look,
and that became standard.
In our world, clearly OPC, MQTT, these have all added value. There's no question about that. ISA 95, ISA 88, IEC standards. If nothing else, in fact, I remember talking about the ISA 88 thing. What they brought was a common set of terminology. At least we can now be talking about the same thing, right? When we say
at least we can argue about the same things,
or a unit or whatever. So there are clearly benefits. The problem is just the heterogeneity of what we do in manufacturing. It's impossible to have a one size fit all.
I agree.
So partial, definitely helpful.
This is a good one.
The easiest one.
Is there a thing MES out of the box?
I've never seen one.
You've never seen one?
I literally have never seen one that actually didn't require. Depends what you define as out of the box.
Yeah.
But
this is a quick one.
It just doesn't.
To me, this is one of the biggest sort of fallacies, because it's out of box actually means whose environment you're willing to put your development and integrators on. With very little respect to their freedom to choose all sorts of things. So at best, you get ready to use or ready to integrate at best.
We've all seen, even in the same factory, 2 lines do it slightly differently because of the equipment. So there's going to be some configure. When I was at SAP, we segmented MES into 14 different sub-verticals, right? Some were very compliance driven, some were very PLM or aerospace and things like that. Some were very cost.
Different systems feeding different areas, different data is flowing. The quality cell talks back to quality people.
We need composable MES.
That's a great idea. Okay, but speaking of composable MES, somebody needs to build that stuff.
Yeah.
So what is your verdict on this one?
So, again.
Don't be shy. I mean, I can
No,
take it.
I get it. So,
they want to hear the truth.
A little anecdote. When we built ThingWorks quite a few years ago, as customers started to adopt it, we did find that we did not build in adequate capabilities for team development, multi-site development, version management, all of the boring grunt stuff to deploy technology at scale. So I actually think we do tend to maybe not put enough emphasis on that kind of boring governance stuff. But the flip side's equally true. In our podcast, I talked about the comment that my business partner Russ made, that we also have opportunities for disposable apps, right? If you have a quality problem or a new product introduction and you want to apply technology to accelerate that, what's wrong with having some citizen developers?
Nothing wrong.
That's where the PC came from.
That's
right?
that's like the software people stole Scrum and Agile from operations. We should kind of take it back, because we just need the tools. So I think this is a road, and in our roadmap, you can see we've added a lot of stuff to support this. It's not declare full victory, but the roadmap is very clear. Like what works for software development, across languages, platforms, system, what have you, will work for operations too. So,
and again, it
stick to the roadmap.
It circles right back to that democratization, right? The more people that are capable of deploying this technology, the better.
Yeah. So, it is.
It can be, right?
It can be, but it's also possible to do.
Yeah, it can be chaotic as well.
Totally. Okay, let's go back to this topic. So, myth or not?
No, it's absolutely not a myth. I mean, unequivocally, there's the old saying, the sound of one hand clapping, right?
Yeah.
Decision without insights, without action. You have to do something. That might be a human, right, taking that action. It might be
automation setup.
All the best analytics in the world. If you're not, or as a friend of mine told me 20, 30 years ago, if you're not opening, closing valves, you're not making money. So at some point, you actually have to interact with the physical world and do something useful. So it needs to be action driven. And it goes back to that cycle, sense, decide, act. We're going to continually use technology and humans for different pieces of that. But no, it's an absolute must.
So, absolute must. So peanut butter all the way.
I have to understand that graphic. But.
Yeah. It's not fluff. It's like
there we go.
That's the
binder.
I think the 0 and 1s here. So next is actually a cool one for this room. Open ecosystem is the future of manufacturing tech stack.
Unequivocally, yeah. I mean, no one can do it themselves. And by the way, I like the words you chose there. Open ecosystem. I've gotten into religious debates thousands of times with people around open source versus open ecosystem versus open API. There's pros and cons to each. Let's start with customers demanding that any of the technology that they use, at a minimum, have APIs to let you get in and out, to get at the data you own, to get at event-driven architectures that let you tie these things together.
Yeah, when we look at this, and I kind of made a small comment on that, if you see like two interesting phenomena in our numbers, like, not a small number of connectors being hit on a monthly basis, 10 million, it's quite a lot, but you see 350 million API hits per month. So several orders of magnitude higher. And that just tells me like one very simple thing, that this is when I said there's like the new architecture demands it. It's like you can't build any world-class, scalable B2B enterprise architecture if you're not open, because you don't know what's the N number of things that will come on the other end.
Plus legacy, making it future resistant. And when I worked at Microsoft for a brief stint, I remember speaking with the manufacturing team there, and those of us that came out of the kind of the plant floor and factory world, we think of manufacturing as making stuff. If you add, a manufacturing company does way more than that, right?
Yeah.
They design products, they procure materials, they make stuff, they sell stuff, service stuff. So we have to also think horizontal. I mean, I'm sure I saw some of your partners out here today, right? Integrating with PLM, things like that.
Yeah.
And then a couple of companies I work with that are here, HighByte, Leela, Twin Thread, their ability to integrate with Tulip was literally like hours and days. So kudos
That's the goal.
to you for making
so
that.
So we think that's real. We got to the last one, last but not least, and then we move on. This is an easy one. Is money budget the limiting resource to prevent technology adoption?
No, and obviously it's a factor. I always felt like, and I'd love to hear from the end users, their perspective. When I, as a vendor, would go in and try and sell a solution to a customer, I never felt like I was competing against the other people that did exactly what I do. I always felt like I was competing for spending, right?
Yeah.
You've got competing
For
priorities,
budget, yeah.
You've got a finite budget, so you had to think what's going to give me the best return right now, or compliance or something like that. And then increasingly I've noticed, I think we touched on this in the podcast, people used to have a lot more resources in-house. You had people at the plant, you had people at corporate. Sometimes it's literally getting the mind share and availability of the folks in the customer integrator to do the work. Yep. Or another challenge remains, and I've seen this firsthand a few times, where the time to implement some technology on the production floor, the downtime to implement it makes it impractical. We literally can't shut down. We're running 110%. So lots of other factors, and of course humans.
So budget is a thing. What I'll add to that,
that's easily addressable.
Easily addressable, and also I think in what happened, you see it in the cost of starting companies today. 2 kids in Starbucks with an AWS account can go pretty far. That's
same with implementing Tulip, right? If you go, when you did a big bang MES 20 years ago, you started at $2 million, right? In 2 years. Now you can do bite-sized pieces with composable MES.
Yeah. So
I got the plug-in twice.
That's all the time we have, and hopefully you enjoyed some myth busting. And thank you, Rick. It was great, and we'll do this again. And we have Q&A time? Okay.
Yay.
Cool. That's even better. So so there's a mic in the back.
I'm going to start this out.
But don't go easy on Rick.
Everybody can line up behind me.
I'm ready.
I know Natan's answer to this, so you can.
So I won't
Rick,
talk.
For those that are all the fluff ones here, what's the most dangerous?
I have to recall all the ones that are fluff.
I can give you some.
Dangerous. That's a good question. I mean, there's physical danger, right? People do forget that a lot of things we do in manufacturing, if we do them poorly, people get hurt, the environment gets damaged, equipment gets damaged. I don't know. That's a tough one. It's so multidimensional. I do think ultimately the lack of respect for manufacturing workers, dangerous in terms of the macro sense for the growth and success of the manufacturing industry, solving those things that were fluff about them not being knowledge workers, flexibility, education. Those would be at the top of my list right now. Because if we find ourselves without the talented people we need to bring these factories, and again, I have a bit of a passion about reshoring, but even globally, if we can't get the folks into it, then it's kind of all a moot point.
Cool. I think we have
I know.
another one. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you. Sure. I'll ask another, statement, and you can tell me if it's fluff. Manufacturing industry, people on the shop floor don't need consultants.
Oh, wow. And you're with just. You don't have to answer that.
Let me see your shoes. I can tell quickly by your shoes, right? Whether you should be on the plant floor or not. Well, that's also a circular problem, right? Because consultants that lived and breathed manufacturing and know how manufacturing environments work play a huge role now because the companies don't have those resources in-house that they used to. So certainly the right ones, we'll go partial, because the right ones have massive value to bring.
Right.
You have to understand the nuances of manufacturing, though. Just bringing in I won't name names.
Yeah.
But yeah, you just need practical knowledge. And similarly, as we just talked about, transformation is not all about technology. It's process, it's people. So there's a role to play as a facilitator for industrial transformation as well.
I also think that, consultants is super broad, right?
Sure.
And there is, between, I don't know, a single management consulting operation that doesn't have digital transformation practice area. You can say the same about SIs, and then you can go down the chain to the smaller shop boutiques that become very specialized. And it's the way the system kind of worked for years and years that mapped to the current architectures. Because if you had to implement a data center and above it like 15 different things, B2B enterprise tools, and so somebody need to do all that work. And the knowledge to do all that work became, MES practice in this giant SI and ops practice in that international, management consulting firm. But I think they're changing. That's the point I'm trying to make. If they're not changing, then that business and system integration is, and I always rant about that. I'm sorry, I have to rant a little bit here. It's like it's been, and by the way, I love all you system integrators and consultants out there, to be clear. I'm happy you're coming along for the change, but you can't, it's like lean thinking. You can't take that value away from the customer. So if you create that value to the customer, then you have a right to exist. If not, if you don't change fast enough, you'll be out. That's what I guess I'm trying to say.
Two more quick comments on that. I think that the other role that consultants can play, it's a shame that it needs to be the case, but also is that not bridging the gap technically between OT and IT, but helping folks on both sides understand the others and help. If you've done something amazing at your site and you want to roll it out to 10 other sites, that's a whole selling process, right? So maybe there's opportunities to help expand implementation as well.
Yeah, and the last shameless plug here is we have a session with McKinsey coming up, and like Rick said, those who get it are invaluable and can save you a lot of money and create a tremendous amount of value. So.
Great. Hi, Liz Reynolds, MIT, also worked for the Biden administration on the manufacturing agenda, also a strategic advisor to Tulip. And earlier we were talking about the penetration of robots in China and the really advanced investments they're making in advanced manufacturing and in digitalization.
Yep.
We are not seeing the same rate of adoption in this country. What is it going to take to bring a sense of urgency to this agenda in the U.S.?
I'm going to answer it in a scary way because I think we all know the one thing that sadly would invigorate that, and that's a global conflict. If we need, and I hate to say that, but look at the history, right? Every time we need to make a lot of planes and boats and whatever's, we get it done. We figure it out. Maybe we need another quest, right? Whether it's solve the energy challenges or whatever. Reinvigorating our manufacturing environment to meet some other bigger quest, I think is important. Obviously, we have recognized, and COVID and supply chain issues, we realize it is a national security imperative to make certain things domestically as well. But similarly, we need more investment dollars in the, venture firms don't tend to invest in primary technology and physical technology. They've had bad experiences in capital intensive stuff. So that might require more federal and state investment in these kinds of things. But ultimately, it's an investment problem, right? And where that comes from, again, I hope it's not forced investment because we need to change the way we're doing things overnight. And secondly, is starting that process back in our universities and even our schools to say manufacturing's cool, it's interesting, it's a tech industry, right? And it is. We all know that. So we have multi-dimensional. I'm actually looking forward to your insights on that later today.
Great.
Yeah. So the education point, I think, is critical. Another one that would make a difference is how you integrate the long tail of how manufacturing really works. Because like our supply chain is composed of very few, relatively speaking, large OEM and many, 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 companies that supply them. And I think that supply chain got eroded the past couple decades when the economy in this country shifted more and more to services and that kind of reality, and the knowledge sort of traveled with that. So meaning like how many people in the country can run CNC machines, how many CNC machines that we have. So those are, we talk a lot about the investment in things that are, and I think Liz might talk about this as well, like we have to get semiconductors back in the country. Well, that's right, because we don't want a sole supply, and that's critical and all that kind of stuff. But how do we get, you go to one factory in China, you see a floor, literally there are 2,000 CNC machines. That could be like half CNC machines in entire states in the US, like in one site. And that is not technology you can do away with. It makes our cars, it also makes the weapons that would need for a global conflict. So that's definitely like, I don't think if there's no equivalent chip act for advanced manufacturing, we're going to get there.
We did get the head fake, and this is not to discount awesome stuff that companies like Formlabs do, but we did have a big head fake with additive for a while, right?
Yeah.
Where it was going to, we'll be printing in titanium.
Well, Formlab never said that the processes are going to change manufacturing forever. It was always about, you can use it to do rapid and all that kind of stuff. But continue with
But I think it's the mythology, right? That the non-informed folks said, oh, we'll just, we're going to implement that. We'll print parts.
Just hit print.
The lights out factory. We got a long way to go to get there.
Yeah. So we need like the CHIP Act, we need an Advanced Manufacturing Act, and we need to invest. Go ahead.
Fun question for you. So let's talk a bit about IT. I think I've mentioned this before. By the way, I'm Gilad from Tulip, chief instigator here as well. IT department, back in first industrial revolution when electricity came around, we had electricity managers in plants, which don't exist anymore. Where is IT heading the same way? Are we going to see the demise of the CIO? What's going to happen with?
Oh, I love this question.
What's that?
Demise of CIOs. We have some CIOs
We'll
here,
become a multi-dimensional. I mean, I've worked with so many different CIOs over the year that have been radically different, right? Some are operators that operate infrastructure. Some are change agents that really were critical to driving digital transformation. There's no universal answer to what the role of the CIO is. You start people now adding chief AI officers and kind of compatible roles, or CDOs, right? So that's, I guess the definition is more like the role will change. It's going to have to change, right? Because it's not just keeping the network running and the servers running. They don't have servers anymore. Someone else's computer in the cloud. I just think the role's going to change dramatically.
The thing, you can see some stuff that already changed. So there used to be this, I guess some still exist, but this idea of chief innovation officers. I feel like that's kind of dead, because people understood
Very
that,
short
like it was like,
life,
but it was like, that doesn't really mean anything in the sense of impact on the organization, and actually it's everyone's job. And I think on the CIOs, the transition from someone who is just, generally speaking, in charge of reducing cost and risk, giving you security and emails and, making sure the budget is intact, to someone who, what's the value of our data? So like this mesh up of, like the title Daniele holds, like digital transformation plus operational excellence. I think those are stuff that in some companies would to a degree, fall into a CIO role, but it's not good enough anymore. So I think some CIOs got the memo and they're completely changing how they operate to how are we helping achieve what the company needs. So a company needs growth. Okay, so you need a great commercial engine. So what's that? That's Salesforce and this and that and ERP and whatnot on one side of the house. And it also needs a new production system to meet all the other things that the company does in a manufacturing organization. So they apply the same logic and not this kind of, piecemealing and being like, okay, your operations, go to the back of the line. We need to get more dashboard for the CRM this quarter. So I think and they stopped deciding for operations. That's also a very important thing that I sensed in the past decade.
I do think also that they're going to have to change the way they interact with vendors, right? Much more collaborative with a different group of vendors, right? Historically, It's been the classic compute and infrastructure vendors.
Yeah.
If they're going to help their OT folks, they're going to have to learn to work differently with the vendors in our space.
Yeah, and it's also another mindset, because sometimes this also changed, because people, let's just say they got past are we going to cloud? Nobody's not going to cloud. Okay, it doesn't mean you don't do stuff on the edge. That's still valid. There's lots of stuff to do on the edge. They interact. But some conversations with CIOs is like, and tell me how much money is going to save me, which is like, yes, it's an important question. We can get to that answer. But the more important question is like, how much value are you going to generate by doing that?
That goes back to what I was saying about you have an almost infinite number of things to spend your precious resources on.
Yeah.
And yes, there's compliance stuff that you have to close the books, you have to meet your regulatory requirements, no question. But when it comes to the innovation, incremental improvement, new products, the things that you don't buy. By the way, this is I remember being at an AMR conference a bunch of years ago, and the vendor and the customer would get up on stage and talk about this great implementation. And with enterprise systems in particular, more often than not, it was the innovative things that the customer and their integrators did around that core. Processing a purchase order isn't particularly innovative, right? So, but it was, and this goes back to your open ecosystem, open APIs. Innovation is going to happen around those core applications.
So I get the last question.
Sure.
What are you?
What
myth are you excited about for the next, 5 to 10 years?
Top one on the map right now has to be AI, just in terms of its role, how it's going to impact everything that we do. I mean, robotics is applied AI in many ways, right? Yes, there's mechatronics and all that. I mean, a lot of the topics we've talked about are going to have some part of the Venn diagram associated with AI and related technology. Same thing, if I asked everyone what AI means to them, I'll get 110 different definitions.
When it will eventually work robustly in use case A, B, and C, we will stop calling it AI.
Right.
It will disappear.
Exactly.
It will just become, this is just solving the problem. It's like several versions of AI in the past 20 years have disappeared into the system that we use. But that's all the time we have. Thank you very much, Rick, again.